I'm here to tell you that I demand better science stories, and I want you to as well. We need to start with common ground. Science is absolutely amazing. It is one of the most beautiful expressions of our humanity. You know, we are born to be curious, and as a species, we've learned to harness that curiosity and do really cool things with it. We've learned how to cure disease. There's the cases of polio after the vaccine was introduced. We've learned to look into other universe, other galaxies. This is the Andromeda galaxy. We've walked on the moon. And I think the important thing that I want to say about science is that it's this beautiful dance where science is shaped by humans and we're shaped by it. And we're in a cool place. The United States spends more on science research and development than any other nation. That's great. But every 3 years, there's an assessment of how different countries are doing. They take about 500,000 15-year-olds and they study reading, math, and science. And where does the United States stand? Right here, right above average. Additionally, if you look at how many Americans say science has a mostly positive effect on society in 2023, 57%. If you look at what percentage of US adults have confidence that scientists act in the best interest of the public, 27% say not much or none at all. That's this year. That's a problem. We are losing the battle to share the wonders of what science is. Now, I asked AI to give me 5 hands that had live long and prosper. You can see this is what it generated. We're not there yet. But I have a question for the audience. How many of you are scientists? Okay, we got about 30%, 40%. How many of you can name a living scientist? Show of hands. Much higher. This is probably, I'd say 80%. Now, if you were to walk right outside these doors onto the street, well, maybe not out this street, maybe walk 10 miles that way or that way, and you were to ask how many people can name a living scientist, 3 out of 4 people cannot name a living scientist. 72% cannot. It is clear that people do not have a personal connection to science or scientists. Now, we all have family stories, and these stories help define us. This is my grandpa, Everett Lloyd Rivest. He grew up on a farm in Michigan, and he wanted to be an engineer. He was an engineer at General Electric in Schenectady, and he was also found time to be a great farmer. He grew the best tomatoes on the planet. My dad, who's sitting right here, grew up seeing this, and he saw through that story that it was okay to dream to be an engineer. It was okay to love math. And he was able to follow that passion to become a professor with an office in this very building. He created unbreakable codes, and he likes tomato soup and BLTs. I grew up seeing that story. And I grew up in Boston, and I would go to the Celtics games, and I'd wait afterwards to see Larry Bird, and I'd try to get his autograph. And then I went to a conference with my dad in Japan, and I saw all these people lining up to get his autograph. And I realized that's my science hero. That being a nerd is cool. And I learned that I could follow my curiosity to do really cool things. And so I studied across the street in the Peak Hour Center, studying the brain. I did my PhD in neuroscience here and did a postdoc as well. I hate tomatoes, but I love eating apples in front of lava. The point here is stories matter. Seeing something matters. Representation matters. And when we live and see things that are possible, it can change our scope of what is possible. And we have the greatest tool on the planet to plant stories, and that's television. It's the screens. This is how we tell stories. This is how we can take experiences that would otherwise live in just a family and tell it to hundreds of people, millions of people. Now, this is a very powerful tool, and we're not using it well. I have to admit, I am a science geek. I have watched every single science program that has ever existed, and they've all felt like homework to me. I've always wanted to like science programming more than I did. And I decided that I was going to do something about it. So I was sitting in the lab, doing really cool stuff, studying the brain, publishing in Science, Nature Neuroscience, PNAS, mapping out the human brain. And I sat there with my pipette, with enzymes and DNA together, and I asked myself a hard question. I said, if I wasn't doing this, would someone else do this work? And the answer was yes. And if I care about science, and I care about changing the way science happens and what it means for society, this is not the right thing for me. And I decided I was going to try to do something about it and change the way scientists are seen. So I quit. I quit my job as a postdoc. I flew to Los Angeles. I started pitching this dream of changing the way scientists are seen on the big screen. I got some of the biggest names in Hollywood to kind of sign on to this dream, and they told us, make science sexy. Find young, tattooed scientists with mohawks and motorcycles, and that's what the market wants. I was, okay, I'm inexperienced, let's do this. All right, so we went out and presented this to the world, and that is not what the market wanted. I was told scientists are not interesting. Now, everyone here who knows science and knows a scientist knows that this is an insane thing to say, but this is the way that the people who put things on the screen that can teach us think about scientists. So, what do you do when you're told something that's insane? You prove them wrong, right? I had already committed to this bad idea, so I'm gonna go all in. So I applied for a grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, basically to prove that scientists are interesting. And got the grant, did the research. I have a detailed spreadsheet of 583 field scientists. And at this process, I narrowed it down to 50 I would contact, talked at length with 30 of these scientists, and filmed a half a dozen in 11 countries on 5 continents. And that's where Lonnie was one of the ones that I met during this. And what did I learn? So I'm going to tell you, we met this guy, Craig Packer. He's the preeminent lion scientist. And his research in the Serengeti, he called it his Garden of Eden. And he was studying lions and how they relate. And his research ended up crossing paths with an illegal hunting operation and a declining lion population. And it ended up becoming this true crime, cloak and dagger story where all of a sudden there's guns and death threats and murder. And at the end, the president of Tanzania kicked him out of Tanzania because he was rubbing the wrong feathers. And he had to leave his Garden of Eden. And this was a more exciting science story than I've ever heard. But what he told me next changed everything. He said, I've been on 50 shows, and no one's ever asked me about my story. They always say, can that lion over there, is it dangerous? Can it come kill us? And you'll say, yes, but, and they'll cut off right before the but. That's science programming. And it was when he said this, I felt like Neo in the Matrix. All of a sudden, everything made sense to me. Right? We are missing the story. The story is a human story. The hero's journey is the most classic archetype for storytelling. And it is, if you read what it is a science story. You're living in an ordinary world. You have a call to adventure. You have a question. You embark on that adventure. You go do your studies. You struggle. And hold that word struggle for a second. And then you learn something, and you bring it back, and you tell the world about it. The hero's journey is the story of science, but science stories are not told as the hero's journey. Struggling is important. If you care about teaching facts, there's a study from this woman, Lynn Ziegler at Columbia, that just by pairing struggles, the stories of struggles with facts, you can teach kids better. You take 2 groups. One group of kids, you teach them facts. The other group, you teach them the same facts, but you teach the struggles that scientists went through to get those facts. Guess who learns more? The kids who learn these stories learn better. And specifically, struggle-oriented background information increase students' interest in science, increase their delayed recall of key science concepts, and improve their abilities to solve complex problems. And as a guy who studies the brain, I know that emotional storytelling increases oxytocin, dopamine, and glucocorticoids when there's stress. and allows for memories to be formed better. So I met this woman. Now the question is do these stories exist en masse? And the answer is yes. I met this young woman in Egypt. She wanted more than anything to dig fossils in the desert. And she was told, no, you can't because you're a woman. She had read stories of the past, women pharaohs who had ruled Egypt, and she did not take no for an answer. She now runs a lab in Egypt, and women from all over the Middle East come to her and say, you've shown me what's possible. That's a science story, but it's a human story of possibility. I met a gentleman, Tommy Rock, in Navajo Nation, who lived with his grandpa in a small wooden shack. His grandpa was a uranium miner who got cancer from uranium poisoning. He ended up using his science to find all these sources of uranium poisoning throughout Navajo Nation, including in a primary school that kids were drinking dangerous water, and now he's cleaning it up. It's a story of possibility. Exposure matters. Just like with my family story, you start telling one of these stories, it shows other people what's possible. Those people then have those stories and show what else is possible. That brings me to CANARY, which is not just a science story. It's a story about struggle and the human condition and what it takes to actually do science. Just tell human stories. That's science storytelling. Now, I have a call to action, and then I'm done. For scientists, tell your story. Science communication does not end when your campus paper reports your science. Tell me the stories you think I should tell. To Hollywood, Hollywood's missing out on the best, most universal, hopeful stories with world-altering stakes. This is classic storytelling, and it can be educational. Call me. To all of you, science stories matter. You may not have to quit your job the way I did and focus on this full time, but we can't lose this battle. Stakes are too high, and our future depends on it. So let's normalize having a science story. Think about the time that one of your family members was curious or went after something. Let's normalize having that be part of our life. Thank you.